It was Tuesday morning in Frankfurt when the email arrived from Oracle License Management Services. The email said, "You are one of our most important customers. We have chosen you for a review. A license compliance audit had been initiated." The VP of IT read it twice and immediately forwarded it to his IT infrastructure head, and then picked up the phone to call their CIO in Singapore. They had 45 days to begin the audit according to the instructions in the email, and they had 45 days to prove they were compliant across an Oracle estate spanning 6 countries, 4 cloud platforms, and over a decade of accumulated deployments. They had no idea where to start. This is their story. Let's first meet the client. For obvious reasons, we are not going to name this company. What we can tell you is that they are a global manufacturing and logistics firm, revenues north of $4 billion, operations across Europe, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and North America. Like most enterprises of their size and age, Oracle had grown into every corner of their business. Oracle database running under their ERP systems in Germany, Oracle e-business suite managing finance operations in Dubai, Fusion middleware deployed on premises in their Ohio data center. And this Ohio data center had a server room that frankly nobody had touched in 3 or 4 years because it just kept working. And then there were the cloud workloads, some on AWS, some on Azure, and a few teams that had quietly spun up Oracle database on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, that is Oracle's own cloud, thinking that would somehow simplify things. Well, it hadn't. On top of that, 2 acquisitions in the past 4 years had brought in entirely separate Oracle environments, including different license agreements, different support contracts, and different versions. Nobody had ever reconciled them into a single picture. When that audit notice arrived, the honest answer to, "Are we compliant?" was nobody knew. Let us look at the first instinct of our client and why it failed. The first call was to their existing system integrator, a large, well-known global consultancy that had managed their SAP transformation a few years prior. Good firm, smart people. But here's what happened. The SI Sentinel team, they spent a couple of weeks doing interviews, pulling data, maybe reviewing contracts, and then they produced a report, 140 pages, that essentially said, your estate is complex, your exposure may be significant, and you need to do more work to understand it. And they gave a quote for the next phase of work. Well, the quote was just under $500,000 and a timeline of 4 to 6 months. And what did they promise at the end of it? That they would have a point-in-time snapshot of what the compliance was, accurate as of course as of that date, and already starting to go stale the moment it was delivered. That's when someone in their board introduced them to us, that is Rhythm. The company's CFO put it bluntly in my conversation with her. We paid a lot of money to be told we had a problem we already knew we had. We need you to be different. And indeed, we at Rhythm proposed a very different scope of work. Our first deliverable was how to manage Oracle's audit notice. In this, we also defined the ownership of correspondence with Oracle. This included drafting the responses and strategizing information and data sharing and restrictions. The next deliverable was to provide deployment and compliance reports. The third deliverable was license optimization and managing risk. The final deliverable was negotiating with Oracle and reducing the settlement volume if there was going to be any settlement. And the best part of it for the customer, of course, was that it was going to be fully outcome-based payments, almost. I mean, we did ask for an initial amount of token money, but then our entire money was going to come on outcome-based stuff. On the very first day, we at Raytheon suggested the timelines and the initial correspondence needed with Oracle. This was without even getting into the contracts that the customer had with Oracle. And the customer was very much impressed because it clearly exhibited our expertise. After that, we at Raytheon proposed a two-pronged approach to understanding the compliance situation. The first was a detailed discovery of the deployment, both known and unknown. Very important, both known and unknown. The second was a detailed study of the various Oracle contracts and entitlements. We provided tooling for discovery across every environment. The on-premise data centers in Ohio and Warsaw, for the VMware clusters in Frankfurt, for the Oracle Cloud tenancies, and for the AWS and Azure environments where Oracle workloads were quietly running. Once we had a clean, unified view of the entire estate, we provided the initial license compliance and exposure report. And this compliance report and exposure one came as a shock to the customer because we found a commercial exposure of more than $30 million of license alone. Let me repeat, license value at list price of $30 million, non-compliance. This was not including the support or any penalties for past usage. If these were included, the potential commercial exposure due to non-compliance was upwards of $50 million. At any deep discount levels, the amount that Oracle could charge the customer was obscene and humongous. But then here is where the story gets interesting. Because the audit was the crisis and the potential exposure was so very high that we started finding that there was cost reduction that was going to be turning out to be an opportunity. Once we in Raytheon had the clean, unified view of the entire estate, we started finding waste everywhere. For example, we caught 3 separate AWS deployments that were creating significant unlicensed exposure. In another case, processor licenses that had been separately purchased for workloads which had been decommissioned 18 months ago, still being renewed and support paid. Similarly, in another case, Oracle Database Enterprise Edition deployed in environments where Standard Edition or Standard Edition 2 would have been fully sufficient. Option and packs, diagnostics pack, tuning pack enabled in some instances by default in the database and never turned off, creating license obligations for features nobody was even actually using. We at Raytheon did a what-if analysis as part of the report. And what we said is, let us assume that there is no non-compliance and do a what-if analysis. The analysis found that if the non-compliance was taken theoretically at 0, the client was overpaying by approximately $2.7 million annually. So 30 million of non-compliance or 50 million of non-compliance on one side, or 2.7 million of overpaying. And this was not because not anybody had a complete view, but basically because people had not understood what they should be doing. We then moved into the next phase of tasks in the scope of work. We suggested the different actions that had to be taken by the customer to bring down the currently inherent non-compliance to 0. This work was to be carried out by, of course, by the client IT team, but we and the client IT team reviewed on a daily basis the changes made to ensure that not a single bit of non-compliance or potential non-compliance existed in the system. Inventory discovery was done regularly on machines and the instances that had been remediated. Within a couple of weeks, the non-compliance was reduced to zero. In parallel, during the time work was being done internally, we managed the audit engagement with Oracle. It was not easy, but our experience and legal knowledge helped in keeping the wolves at bay. Finally, data was provided to Oracle, and there was no non-compliance. The audit was resolved. There was no penalties. It was a clean position, fully documented, and the data, most importantly, was defensible. What was the lesson? We asked the CFO what the key lesson was from the whole experience. Her answer was sharp. She said, "We had been thinking that the Oracle audit was a problem that one of our big four or the large outsourcing partners could handle. But we realized it is a very different kind of challenge that needed people with extremely rare attributes, people having the extremes of technical knowledge about Oracle products, extremes of Oracle licensing knowledge, extreme levels of legal and contracts understanding, and equally good clarity on how the OEM or publisher thinks." We were pleased, of course. For large global enterprises, the instinct is always to go with a big name, the firm whose logo you already know, whose partners you have had dinner with. And there are things those firms do brilliantly. Oracle license management is not one of them. It is too specialized, too fast moving, too consequential to be a sub-service inside a multi-tower engagement. This client figured that out, fortunately, before the audit became something worse. If your organization is running Oracle at scale, across geographies, across platforms, across business units, and you don't have a current unified view of your license position, the question is not whether you have exposure. The question is, how much is your exposure? And if this story sounded a little too familiar, that's probably a sign. Do call us.